There is a place on this earth where the ground has been frozen for 650,000 years. And yet, beneath that ancient ice, something is waking up. A land bigger than the entire continent of Australia. A land where winter temperatures drop so low that exposed skin dies in under a minute. A land where the trees grow crooked because the ground beneath them never fully thaws. Not in summer, not ever. And yet, 3 million people have decided to call it home. Siberia covers 13.1 million square kilometers. That is more than the United States and all of Europe combined. It holds over 80% of Russia's known mineral and energy wealth. It contains the world's deepest lake, the world's coldest permanently inhabited settlement, and the longest highway built on permafrost on the planet. And almost none of it appears on the front pages of the world's newspapers. This is not the Siberia you think you know. Not the exile camps, not the gray brutalism, not the place where empires sent the people they wanted the world to forget. This is the Siberia that existed before any of that. The Siberia that will exist long after. The Siberia the world has been too afraid or too distracted to look at directly. Because when you actually look at it, what you find is not a wasteland. What you find is the most important piece of land on Earth. So here is the question this entire journey is built to answer. How does a place defined by suffering, a place the world used as a prison, become a treasure so vast, so ancient, and so consequential that its fate may determine the fate of every human being alive today? That question has an answer. And by the end of this journey through Siberia, you will know it. Oymyakon should not exist. No reasonable human calculation would put a permanent settlement here. The nearest city is a 2-day drive away, on roads that exist only because the ground is hard enough to drive on, and only because the temperature is cold enough to make it so. The moment the ground softens, the roads disappear. In Oymyakon, in the Sakha Republic of Eastern Siberia, the official recorded low temperature is minus 67.7 degrees Celsius, minus 89 degrees Fahrenheit. It was recorded on February 6, 1933. A Soviet meteorologist named Sergei Obruchev marked it down in a field notebook with hands that were likely wrapped in 3 layers of reindeer hide, and then kept working. That temperature is close to the surface temperature of Mars. 500 people live here, full-time, year-round. You land at the local airstrip if the fuel hasn't frozen in the plane's lines, which it sometimes does. And the first thing you feel is not cold in the way you've ever felt cold. It is a physical compression, like the air itself has weight. Your nose hairs freeze on the first inhale. The rubber soles of your shoes crack within the hour if they are not rated for these temperatures. Your breath doesn't just mist, it crystallizes in midair with a faint crackling sound. Locals call the whisper of the stars. The village has one school. The children attend until temperatures drop below minus 52, at which point class is canceled. Not because anyone is concerned the children can't handle the cold, but because at that temperature, the engines on the school buses can no longer reliably start. There is a hot spring here. The name Oymyakon in the Yakut language means roughly unfrozen water. This spring is why people settled here. Reindeer herders needed water for their animals in winter. They found it here, they stayed, and then they kept staying. Because the Sakha people, the indigenous people of this region, did not end up here by accident. They came here because this land, brutal as it is, had something to offer. It always did. But there is something in the ground beneath Oymyakon that even the Sakha didn't fully understand. Something that scientists have only recently begun to measure. And we'll come back to it, because what it contains concerns some of the most careful researchers on the planet. First, the road out of Oymyakon and the people who travel it. But the Sakha weren't just surviving the cold. They were busy learning to use it in ways that no other culture on Earth had ever managed. The Kolyma Highway runs 2,031 kilometers from Magadan on the Pacific coast to Yakutsk, the regional capital. It is known throughout Russia by a name that needs no explanation if you know the history, the Road of Bones. Between 1932 and 1953, approximately 500,000 people died building it. Prisoners, political enemies, dissidents, criminals, ordinary people caught in the wrong place at the wrong time were transported to the Kolyma region to extract gold from the earth and to build the roads that would carry that gold away. When a prisoner died, they were buried where they fell. The road was laid on top of them. The permafrost preserved the bodies. Some are still there. Vadim Bersenev is a truck driver from Yakutsk. He has been driving the Kolyma highway for 19 years. He drives a Kamaz, a Russian heavy-haul truck with a cab you climb up into. Tires as tall as a man, and a heating system that he personally rebuilt 3 times because the factory version, he says, wasn't designed by someone who'd actually driven this road in February. When you ask Vadim about the road, he doesn't talk about the cold. He talks about the rule. The rule is simple, and it has never been written down anywhere. If you are on the Kolyma highway and you see a vehicle broken down, you stop, you help. No matter how long it takes, no matter how cold it is, no matter whether you are running late, you stop, because in -55, a broken down vehicle is not an inconvenience. It is a death sentence. You have perhaps 45 minutes before the engine block cracks, before the fuel gels, before the metal of the cab stops protecting you from the air outside it. 45 minutes before the situation becomes irreversible. No law compels drivers to stop. There is no Siberian Good Samaritan statute, no fine for driving past, but no driver drives past. Not one, not ever. When you ask Vadim why, he is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "Because it happened to me once, and someone stopped." In Siberia, the cold removes all the social complexity from the question of whether to help another human being. The answer is not a moral calculation, it is as automatic as breathing. Helping is not an act of kindness here, it is a duty. And that distinction between kindness and duty may be the most honest thing Siberia has to teach the rest of the world. From frozen ground and ancient duty, the journey turns eastward to a land where Siberia begins to burn. Kamchatka is a peninsula the size of California jutting into the North Pacific from Russia's far east. It contains 30 active volcanoes. 12 of them can erupt at any moment. The largest, Kluchevskaya Sopka, stands 4,750 meters tall and has been erupting on and off since humans first arrived in the region 15,000 years ago. It has not stopped since. The air here smells like the inside of a struck match, like something primordial and sulfurous rising from a depth that has nothing to do with the human world. The ground near the thermal vents is soft and steaming. And the colors, yellows, oranges, chalky whites, streaks of rust, look less like Earth and more like the surface of a moon you haven't been to yet. The Valley of Geysers, discovered by a Soviet botanist named Tatyana Ustinova in 1941, contains the second largest concentration of geysers in the world. She was hiking with a local guide along a river and the ground simply erupted. Columns of boiling water shot upward from cracks in the earth. She later wrote that she stood there for a long time without speaking, because there was nothing she could say that would have been adequate. More than 90 species of plants in Kamchatka exist nowhere else on Earth. The brown bears here, and there are roughly 18,000 of them, one of the densest concentrations of brown bears on the planet, have never been hunted by humans at scale. They do not behave the way bears behave elsewhere. They approach riverbanks and fishing holes with a casualness that looks, from the right distance, like confidence. They know something most wild animals have had to forget. They know they are safe here. It is extreme in time. From the burning earth and the full capacity wilderness, the journey moves underground into a silence that is 650,000 years old. Beneath Siberia, there is a layer of permanently frozen ground that in some places extends 1,500 meters deep. 1,500 meters. That is deeper than the height of 4 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other. This permafrost covers 65% of Russia's entire land surface. It has been frozen in its deepest layers since the last ice age. In some places, since the ice age before that. Carbon-dated ice cores drilled from the permafrost contain trapped air bubbles from atmospheres that existed before our species did. And inside the permafrost, preserved in the cold with a fidelity that no museum case could ever replicate, an entire world. In 1977, a group of gold miners in the Magadan region were working a placer gold site when their water cannons broke through into a deposit of frozen silt unlike anything they'd hit before. Inside the silt, a woolly mammoth. Perfectly preserved, skin intact, stomach intact, the contents of its last meal still identifiable, a mixture of grasses and flowers from a meadow ecosystem that no longer exists. The mammoth, later named Dima after the nearby stream, was 6 to 12 months old when it died, approximately 40,000 years ago. Dima now rests in the Zoological Institute in St. Petersburg. But the mammoth is not the most remarkable thing they found. In 2012, a team from the Institute of Cell Biophysics in Pushchino, Russia, announced they had successfully germinated plants from seeds found in permafrost burrows made by Arctic ground squirrels. The seeds were approximately 32,000 years old. They grew, they flowered, they produced their own seeds. A plant that had been frozen since the Upper Paleolithic, since before modern humans reached Europe, was alive again. And then, in 2023, a team of scientists from multiple institutions, including Jean-Michel Claverie of Aix-Marseille University, announced they had successfully revived ancient viruses frozen in Siberian permafrost. One virus, isolated from a 48,500-year-old sample, was still infectious. 48,500 years. Older than cave paintings, older than every civilization we study, and still capable of entering a cell and replicating. The question they could not immediately answer, and the one they are still working to answer now, is this: what else is down there? We'll come back to that question,
because by the end of this journey, it will mean something different than it means right now. If the permafrost reveals Siberia's power over time, what comes next reveals its power over the imagination. You are not ready for Lake Baikal. Nobody is. The photographs don't work, the statistics don't work. You can know intellectually that it is the world's deepest lake. 1,642 meters, deeper than the Grand Canyon is wide. And that knowledge will not prepare you for what it looks like when you stand on its frozen surface in January and look straight down through the ice. Because the ice is transparent, not murky, not cloudy. Not the way lake ice looks everywhere else. Transparent. You can see through it, 3, 4, 5 meters, into water so pure, so ancient, so biologically unique that scientists have given it a formal designation they don't use for other lakes. Baikal is classified as an ancient lake. It is 25 to 30 million years old. Most lakes on Earth last, on average, a few thousand years before silting up. Baikal has been here since before the Alps existed. It holds 20% of the world's unfrozen surface fresh water. Not 20% of Russia's, not 20% of Asia's. 20% of the Earth's, in one lake. The ice in winter is blue. Not the pale, chalky blue of ordinary ice, a deep, oceanic blue. The color of something pressurized and ancient and cold beyond the reach of ordinary cold. The cracks in the ice run for kilometers, perfectly straight, perfectly geometric, as though someone has drawn lines across the surface with a ruler the size of a continent. Local Buryat tradition holds that the lake is sacred, that it is alive, that if you do not show respect on the water, if you are careless or thoughtless or loud, the lake will notice. The scientific community has its own version of this belief. What they have found in the water suggests the lake is not merely a container. It is an ecosystem so complex, so isolated, so evolved in its own direction, that it functions less like a lake and more like a separate biological experiment running in parallel with the rest of life on Earth. The Baikal seal, the Nerpa, exists here and nowhere else. It is the world's only exclusively freshwater seal. How it got here, 3,500 kilometers from the nearest ocean, is a question that paleobiologists have argued over for a century. The most accepted theory involves a prehistoric river connection to the Arctic Ocean during the last ice age. But when you watch a Nerpa surface through a crack in the blue ice and look at you with the flat, black, unconcerned curiosity of a creature that has never had a natural predator, the evolutionary journey feels almost secondary. The fact is simpler. It is here. It is only here. And it has been here, alone, for millions of years. Baikal has no equivalent anywhere on Earth. And now, the number that changes everything. Since 1970, Siberia's average annual temperature has risen by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, twice the global average. In some Arctic regions, the increase is closer to 5 degrees. The permafrost is thawing. Not dramatically, not all at once. A centimeter here, a centimeter there. But the permafrost is a system that does not respond to gradual change gradually. It responds to gradual change abruptly. Scientists call it abrupt thaw. The frozen layer begins to melt from the top down, and when it does, the ground above it collapses. The process is called thermokarst. It creates sinkholes, crater lakes, and landscapes that look as though the Earth itself is slowly dissolving. In Yakutsk, the world's largest city built on permafrost, population 355,000, buildings are already tilting. The engineering solution developed during the Soviet era was to build on stilts, driving deep concrete pilings into the frozen ground and elevating structures above the surface so that the warmth of human habitation didn't transfer directly into the permafrost beneath. It worked. For decades, it worked. It is working less well now. Pipes are buckling, foundations are shifting. Roads that were built on ground that was frozen for thousands of years are beginning to ripple and crack in ways that the engineers who designed them didn't account for. Because the engineers who designed them did not think the ground would stop being frozen. But the building problem is not the real problem. The real problem is what's inside the permafrost. The frozen layer beneath Siberia contains an estimated 1.5 trillion tons of organic carbon. The preserved remains of plants, animals, and microorganisms that died and were frozen before they could decompose. When permafrost thaws, that organic matter decomposes. When it decomposes, it releases carbon dioxide and methane. Methane is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2 over a 20-year timescale. The permafrost, in other words, is a climate feedback mechanism. As it thaws, it accelerates the warming that is causing it to thaw. Katie Walter Anthony, a permafrost researcher at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, has spent her career measuring methane bubbling up through Arctic lakes. She describes watching methane ignite at the surface of lake ice, holding a lighter near a crack and watching a column of flame appear from ancient gas, released after thousands of years of frozen silence. And then there are the viruses, the ones revived from 48,500-year-old samples, the ones that were still infectious. The scientists who revived them were careful to select viruses that posed no known risk to humans. They were careful. But the permafrost contains vastly more than what has been sampled. It contains the biological record of ecosystems we have never studied, pathogens our immune systems have never encountered, organisms from a world that existed before our immunity was shaped by the world we now inhabit. The permafrost thawing is not just a climate event. It is the unsealing of a biological archive that was never supposed to be opened. Which is why what happens next in Siberia matters more than anyone in the world seems to notice. But even this shadow, the thawing, the methane, the ancient pathogens, does not fully answer the central question. To understand how a frozen prison became a treasure, you have to meet the city at the heart of it all. Yakutsk is the coldest city on Earth. It is not the smallest. It is not the most remote. It is not the most isolated. It is a regional capital with universities, theaters, shopping centers, a philharmonic orchestra, and a traffic problem every morning between 8 and 9. It is just the coldest. In January, the average temperature is minus 40 degrees Celsius. On certain days, the schools post temperature warnings, and parents bundle their children into layers of fur and synthetic insulation so complete that only the eyes are visible. And then the children go to school anyway. They do their homework. They argue about football. They fall in love with people they sit next to in class. They are not extraordinary, these children. They are ordinary. That is the point. There is a woman named Itelina Nikitina who teaches biology at school number 2 in Yakutsk. She grew up in a small settlement 3 hours north of the city. Her grandmother was a Sakha elder who remembered, just barely, the time before Soviet collectivization, when the Sakha were herders and hunters, when the relationship with the land was immediate and physical and could not be delegated to infrastructure. Itelina has studied in Novosibirsk. She has been to Moscow. She has been offered positions in universities in other cities. She turned them all down and came back. Her students ask her sometimes why she chose to come back to a place so cold, so remote, so far from the centers of everything. She tells them this: somewhere in the world, there is a place that only you can explain. Not because you are the only one who has been there, but because you are the only one who has been there and then decided to stay. That place is yours, and you are its. I cannot explain Siberia to you from Moscow. I can only explain it from here. Her students are, on average, 17 years old. Most of them will leave. Some will go to university in other cities. Some will start careers in places where the ground doesn't freeze beneath the buildings. Some will build lives in places where January means something different from what it means here. But a few will come back. They always do. Not because they have to. Because, and this is something Itelina cannot fully explain and has stopped trying to, the land does something to you if you were born from it. It makes a claim on you. And the people who come back to Yakutsk, to Oymyakon, to the banks of the Lena River in the deep cold of February, are not the people who couldn't find a way out. They are the people who found a way out and chose to return. They are the people who understood, somewhere in the part of themselves that doesn't respond to logic, that you cannot transplant a love of a specific kind of silence to a different latitude. This place requires everything of the people who live here, and it gives back something that cannot be named easily. Something that looks like pride and functions like belonging, and feels, at -40, on a clear night when the northern lights are burning across the sky in curtains of green and violet and white, like the particular loneliness of being in the presence of something much older and much larger than yourself. Not loss, not grief. Something the Sakha language has a word for that English doesn't. The state of being exactly where you are supposed to be. So, the question we asked at the beginning: how does a place defined by suffering, a place the world used as a prison, become a treasure so vast, so ancient, and so consequential that its fate may determine the fate of every human being alive today? Here is the answer. Siberia became a treasure not in spite of its extremity, because of it. The cold that made it a prison is the same cold that preserved the permafrost, the same cold that kept the woolly mammoth intact for 40,000 years, the same cold that holds in frozen suspension the biological record of a world that no other archive on Earth can replicate. The isolation that made it a place of exile is the same isolation that allowed Lake Baikal to evolve in its own direction for 25 million years, producing a biological experiment of such complexity and uniqueness that scientists are still describing species they find there, still finding things that exist nowhere else. The harshness that should have made it uninhabitable is the same harshness that produced the Sakha, a culture of such ingenuity, such practical wisdom about survival, such understanding of what is essential when everything non-essential is taken away by the cold, that their knowledge of this land is irreplaceable. And the permafrost that is now thawing, the same permafrost that is releasing ancient carbon and ancient pathogens into an atmosphere unprepared for them, is also the most dramatic early warning system the planet has ever produced. Siberia is not just experiencing climate change. It is showing us, at scale, in real time, what the consequences of that change look like before the rest of the world has fully felt them. Siberia is the world's most honest mirror. If you want to know what is coming, in ecology, in biology, in climate, in the relationship between civilization and the natural world, you look at Siberia. You do not look away. The Road of Bones was built by people who were forced to come here. The children of Yakutsk are here because their ancestors chose to stay. And the ground beneath all of them holds the record of everything that came before. A record that is, right now, slowly being released into the atmosphere. which means it is being released into everything.
Siberia was never a wasteland. It was always an archive.
And the most important question about Siberia is not what it is. It is what we decide to do with what it contains.
Itelina Nikitina's students will grow up, and some of them will leave, and some will return. And all of them will carry some memory of what it felt like to live at the edge of what a human body can survive, and to find, there at that edge, a life that was fully theirs. That is not punishment. That is not exile. That is the oldest story there is. The discovery that the most difficult place you will ever go is sometimes the one that makes you most fully yourself. Wherever you are watching this from, whatever the temperature outside your window, there is a Siberia in your life. A place you have been avoiding because it is too cold, too difficult, too far from the centers of everything comfortable. A place that has something to offer that no easier place can replicate. The question Siberia asks of everyone who encounters it is always the same. Are you willing to stay long enough to find out what it's for? If this surprised you, subscribe, because the next journey goes somewhere just as unexpected. The world is larger than the parts of it that have been made convenient for us. We are just getting started.